Thanks, Tammy. Gentlemen, so my first question on this subject on public infrastructure asset management is on the on rather the lack of professionalization and how much does it contribute to poor asset management of the public infrastructure. And I think maybe I need to preface that properly before I allow you to answer the question. So there are a lot of issues currently with the public infrastructure, whether at a municipal level or at a national government level, or with the kind of infrastructure which is provided by the state-owned companies. And I want to find out from you two gentlemen, how much do you think lack of professionalization, in other words, lack of professionals with the right kind of skills contribute to that? Because currently, if for instance you look at the SOEs, they heavily rely on on the private sector. For instance, ESCOM outsourced the maintenance of boilers and its conveyor belts, and there have been currently a number of trips and failing those conveyor belts and those boilers. So clearly, the state cannot just simply outsource its responsibilities to the private sector without having people, right men and women inside it ranks to oversee the work which is being done by the private sector. So again, just to reiterate my question is, how much does a lack of professionalization in the public sector add to poor asset management?
I must say, look,
right?
If I may go first, the first point to make, which is a confession, is that I'm currently in the middle of a thesis that I'm doing, and the topic of the thesis is exactly this particular topic.
Okay.
But the focus is not the lack of the skills, it's nuance a little bit, which is, so you are at least one step ahead of what the real problem, or what I understand the real problem is that my thesis is based on whether the government understands the role of asset management in its governance and decision making. So when they make choices, when they say we are building a clinic, or we are going to, and let's use a very simplistic example where they want to lease a building. So Home Affairs wants to go rent it for whatever, or they want to go and build a dam. The decision process, remember, asset management has got many elements, but asset management at its core, it's a decision process. And it says in that decision process, there are things that you must do in making a decision. You must figure out this thing that I'm deciding on, which objective is that? So that's at a basic level. You must be able to say, I'm building a dam because it's achieving this objective X. Now, government has got what they call triple objectives. You've got social objectives, you've got all of the other fiscal objectives and whatever. But it must be very clear what objective that achieves. Secondly, you must be very clear who is it intended for? What is the target for this thing that I'm doing? Then the thirdly, and a very typical asset manager, and Bafiki would probably talk about this, I suspect, is that is then the management and the use of that asset. You must figure it out before you even bring the asset. You must have figured out, how am I going to manage this asset? How am I going to use it? And how am I going to deal with the user? You understand? So those are part of the decision before the asset comes into fruition. And then from there, you then have to decide, okay, what's the lifespan of this? Okay, it's 50 years. What do I do at 50 years? In 50 years, I'll build a new one or I'll demolish it. Now, unless otherwise you deal with that. So my thesis to say, Does the government understand that base? Understand that it's not about cutting the ribbon. It's about figuring out. The reason why those conveyor belts keeps breaking is because I can tell you, if you go back, it has nothing to do with the skills in the process, very little to do with the skills. It has everything to do with when the decision was taken to build that conveyor belt, what went into the decision. And you will find that part of the decision process, they never took into account what the stuff we're talking about. How do we use this thing? You understand? Because part of deciding how you use a product is whether you have the capability to maintain it. Because if I have a choice between a incandescent light and a candle light, you understand? The choice becomes easy if I don't have electricity, because I know I'll go with a candle light. But if I have electricity, I now cannot only choose a incandescent light, I must choose a incandescent, or I must choose a whatever LED, I must choose whatever. If I choose an LED, I must understand an LED's got a lifespan of X, and then if it's broken, I can't just call any other person to fix it. There's a way. Do you understand those mechanics? If you don't deal with those basics up front, you will end up in a situation where you have installed the candle light, all right? And then you want an electrician that specializes in LED to fix the incandescent light. I mean, I'm using a very vexatious example. So the breaking of the conveyor belt, it's a neither here nor there. You understand? So my contribution to this conversation is going to be on that. That says that, are we sure that in asset management, the people that are either procuring the asset, using the asset, managing the asset, in the decision to even have the asset, understand what they're doing? That's, for me, would be at the base.
Thanks. Bonke, what's your take on this?
Thanks once again, Tammy, for this opportunity to participate in this conversation. And I'm glad Mashilo went first, because I regard him as a subject matter expert from the little that I know of him. And I think I was proven correct now that he's shared with us that is, excuse me, he's busy with an abstract or thesis for his PhD, and well done, bro. We need new knowledge production, and hopefully policymakers will read and be influenced by your contribution to this. Tommy, I have a very limited exposure to well, no, not limited to asset management as a broad base, as a broad definition of capital infrastructure and maintenance thereof. As a built environment practitioner, yes, I was with the facilities management business, but I don't think you need to be with the facilities management business to just understand that, like Mashilo said, infrastructure production or building is not about cutting the ribbon. And most of the time, I think in South Africa, on capital budgets and not the operation and maintenance cycle, the life cycle of the asset in terms of its functionality, its usability, and whether it can be repurposed in future in terms of the disposal. So I think Mashilo probably articulated that much better and much more elegantly and eloquently than I can. But I just want to go back to and stuff that perhaps he knows better than I do. But I mean, in South Africa, I don't know what that tendency is called, but if you look at, there's a document called the NIMS, Infrastructure Management Strategy, and you probably looked at it, Mashilo, in a literature review for your PhD, perhaps. Tammy, it's a well-written document, colleagues. It was written in 2006, a partnership between the CSIR, the National Department of Public Works, and I don't know, another 3 parties to it. And then in 2007, government then legislated, promulgated GIAMA, Government Infrastructure Asset Management Act, with very guidelines.
Yeah. On the basis of that strategy, you're right. Your thought process, 100%. Yeah.
Yes, and I mean, there's a very interesting quote in that document from NIMS, and with your indulgence, it says delivery needs to be understood as embracing not just the construction of infrastructure, but the operation and maintenance of that infrastructure throughout its intended life. Now the question is, load shedding, the South African Human Rights Commission pronouncing on the quality or content of the sewer content on the Val Dam, a Chapter 9 institution, by the way, the Mfuleni issues that we've read about, the Midfall Institute, PRASA, to the closure of the M2 highway. I don't know in which year now. I don't live in Joburg, but I know the M2 was closed in both directions. That's a major carrier and a major arterial route in that ring road around Johannesburg, N3, N1, and M2. It was closed for maintenance purposes that were overdue. Herman Mashilo said, the JRA says we must shut this thing down and fix it. And I don't think had a proper asset management strategy been in place, it would have needed to be as drastic and as disruptive as it ended up becoming. Now, lastly, before then we get into the conversation, is the South African Institute for Civil Engineering has published 3 infrastructure report cards on South Africa in 2006, if I'm not mistaken, 2011, and the last one was in 2017. And they grade water, airports, highways, and all those things. And they gave us a D- or D+. Now, this is South African Institute of Civil Engineering, the country's asset in terms of intellectual capital, amongst others, by the way, in health, in education, and everywhere. And I'm thinking, so these documents are there, and maybe you go into that, into your analysis and critique of that, Mashilo. But so why are we not doing it? You know, where is the failure? Is the failure of leadership? Is there no overarching vision? That's, oh, we don't care. You know, I'm the mayor. I want to cut the ribbon. It can call that my legacy or my delivery. I don't care what happens after that. And you look at the budgeting or the difference between capital budgeting and operation and maintenance budgeting for asset preservation, condition assessments, modernization, especially now green technology. I like your example between a candle and a incandescent fluorescent lighting, and all the energies and the utilities that contribute to the operation and cost and maintenance of infrastructure, especially in occupied buildings. Obviously, there are no utilities as such in bridges and dams and all those kind of things. And so for me, the question is, so where's the disconnect? Where is the disconnect? And I struggle to understand why that is. Is it the lack of understanding of what asset management in the broadest definition is? And I'll stop there for now, and then we can have a conversation. I'm not sure, Mlondi, I beg your pardon, if we've answered your question, because
yes,
you started on the lack of professionalization, but I took it back a bit, that there's policies, there's acts. So where's the disconnect? Why are we not doing it?
Yeah, well, in fact, I did this on purpose, to actually, because I wanted to invoke some thinking on this. Because so I targeted lack of professionalization as a statement, and I wanted to see if you in fact agree or differs, or we would say perhaps it's the lack of the political will, it's not the lack of professionalization per se, but.